real quick addendum because we forgot this in the in our rundown of the news, but the World Video Game Walk of Fame has opened in Ottumwa, Iowa, which is the home of Walter Day's Twin Galaxies. That has been called the birthplace of competitive esports. So everyone should check that out. All right, let's get on with it. It's the Scene World podcast. I'm me. Joerg is there.
Hello. Good. Thank you.
I may sound a little raspy today. My allergies are not happy. But,
wow. Best wishes.
But we're powering through it. In a minute, we're going to be talking to Nick Vivid. He is a member of our staff, first and foremost, but he's also a musician, and he's actually an accomplished musician. He's got a new album out, and he uses some C64 stuff in that. And he's fun to talk to, so we're going to talk to him in a bit. Before that,
good to mention, actually, is that he released it also on a cassette.
Yes, you can get it on a cassette. Before we get to that, though, we're going to go through the normal, regular news stuff that we normally do. So, you want to start that off?
Sure. Okay, news. So, we spoke the last times in our news about the news from Cinemaware Retro, and we actually got even two updates from Sven Fössing, who is the head of Cinemaware Retro.
Cinemaware had been purchased by another company called... They were purchased by Starbreeze, and so we were kind of... we weren't really sure what was happening with Cinemaware Retro, which is what Sven is involved with and who we kind of talked to when we did our podcast like 2 years ago with them.
Yes. So to explain that, Cinemaware Retro is a label that was created by Sven Fössing as a separated sub-company, you could say, on the 13th of anniversary Amiga meeting at Neuss, Germany, last November. And so this is separated from the deal with Starbreeze. That means he will still release all the things he promised. That would be, it came from the desert for the Mega Drive in an enhanced version than the version that was released unofficially without a commercial release. And this, it came from the desert, will be in a real packaging and so on, as you could hear in our interview with him and Matt Falkus in our second podcast.
They're still going to do like the Sega Mega Drive,
yes,
which is Genesis to us in the US.
And they are still working on Wings Reloaded for the Amiga.
Okay. So
that is that thing that was kickstarted for the PC originally and was released. And now they are releasing it on their own as a new Amiga game. That is happening too. And he's working on the Rocket Ranger Collector's Edition. And he's almost completed with that. And it should be sent out as soon as possible. Yes. So maybe even before Gamescom, let's see. Right. So that is still happening. But after that is out, everybody who pre-ordered the Rocket Ranger Collector's Edition with all the versions of the game ever released, there will be a 5% code being emailed for a 5% discount on Defender of the Crown Collector's Edition.
Cool.
Yes. So that's the news that you spread in the newsletter recently.
Excellent.
So that's all safe.
Nice. That's
nothing
good to
to
know
worry
because
about.
we were concerned because Starbreeze had purchased, pretty much all the intellectual property rights of Cinemaware, and we were concerned that some of the things that they had planned might not happen because of that. But it's good to see that they are still going ahead and everything is continuing as planned.
Yeah, well,
Get my
this
spectacles.
this is good because Sven Fössing started his own thing as a subdivision of the company with Cinema Retro. Right. Yes. So, other news is we will be at Gamescom
Yes.
and have a booth at Hall 10.2 Family and Friends area. The same area that we had like last year and the year before.
Nice, nice.
Yes, and as you know, the year before we had a booth as well. And we will do this booth this year again with Hans Highscore
Cool.
as a team booth who are doing sound stuff with video games. And they also did live acts with background sounds at the Film and Games Museum project in the Frankfurt Film Museum last year.
Right.
That we also had a part in with our Twitch live show. Yes. So, and who also will be there is David Pleasance, who was the former CEO of Commodore UK, and before that he was in marketing and so on. And we did an interview with him for SceneWorld on YouTube, youtube.sceneworld.org. And he will be there with Friends Up, which is that networked operating system that is, in some degree, largely based on the concept that Amiga OS had.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And he will be there as well. And he will be also there for interviews or being asked questions and so on. So that means if you want to meet him and if you want to meet up with him at Gamescom and have a chat or an interview, you can email him at pleasance@friendsos.com.
Cool. And what's the name of the OS again?
Friends OS.
Friends OS?
Yes.
Like Friends, the Jennifer Aniston.
Friendsos.com is the URL, and the operating system is called Friends Up.
Okay, yes, that's all right.
Yes.
That's right.
Friends Up is like a network-based operating system that is working in the network and is supposed to work in any platform, any computer, any system.
Right.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. So they will have a booth there, Friends Up, and they will also be in the retro area
Cool.
where David Pleasance will be.
I've got one here from coming from the UK here. We haven't really covered this much because it's not really within our scope. It is retro computing, but we tend to focus more on Commodore and stuff like that. But the Sinclair ZX, as they say over there, there is a development of a newer platform, the Sinclair ZX Spectrum Vega, which is a handheld version that you can play. I've got an article here. It says that this was... Well, first, it says that there are problems within this because of lawsuits and resignations. The Vega raised over £400,000 on Indiegogo, which was well over 300% of the target that it had done.
Wow.
That it wanted. Yeah. It was hugely successful in that. In February, it's marketed by Retro Computers, which is of which Sir Clive Sinclair's Research is a shareholder. In February, Retro said that development of the Vega was complete and a fully functioning prototype was ready to go into production. But in July, a person called Nick Cooper, representing a company called Cornerstone Media, wrote this article, an email. Cooper claimed Cornerstone is behind the national sales release of the Vega and said the contract between itself and Retro Computers had been terminated. Cooper said Cornerstone became aware of issues and disputes within Retro Computers and the subsequent ongoing legal disputes between the various parties, including the ownership of the intellectual property on both the Vega and the Vega Plus. Turns out Retro Computers managers had a falling out. Back in April, two of the directors, Chris Smith and Paul Andrews, quit Retro due to irreconcilable differences between them and the last remaining director, David Levy. Dr. Levy, according to marketing material, is a British international master of chess who is president of the International Computer Games Association and the founder of the Computer Olympiads. Turns out he does not adore his former partners in Retro. Not anymore, anyway. Apparently, neither Smith or Andrews are involved in the management, but they remain shareholders. Basically, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is weird and confusing and is happening within the organization that's trying to produce this. And Retro Computers is taking legal action against Cornerstone because Cornerstone is refusing to sell it, even though the Vega is still available to buy online. So it's very kind of odd. We hope it gets sorted out and everything continues on as it is, but it's just one of those things that seems to hit a lot of these kind of, the crowd-funded campaigns to do this. There's like infighting and just things go wrong, and is again, hopefully everything sorts out and things are cool again, but we have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's always a problem with copyrights and all that too.
Right. So. And this does, have some relevance because the Vega and the Vega Plus, one was a redesigned ZX Spectrum, and the other was the Spectrum in the handheld form. And that's similar to what they're doing with the 64, who we talked to a couple of months ago, because they're doing an actual, the console version, which is, with the keyboard and just looks like an old 64, but they're also planning to do a handheld version of the thing as well. So, this is the kind of thing that can happen in these campaigns, and, they are sort of parallel projects, in that they're both doing the same kind of thing with retro machines and coming out with the handheld versions. So, we hope that nothing like this happens, of course, to the 64, and it doesn't seem like it will, but still, this is of relevance to, this kind of scene.
Well, the thing is, the person behind the 64 actually, he was smart enough to clear that copyright thing and trademark and so on with the current trademark holders in advance. So it's actually pretty neat.
Speaking of current trademark holders, we've got a new Commodore phone.
The Leo.
Yeah. We got a new Commodore phone before I can even get rid of my old Commodore phone, which is still sitting here because they sent it back.
You should do something with that. I don't know.
I don't know what to do with it because it was sent to us as a demo. It's a demo unit, right? We didn't buy it. It doesn't belong to us, right? It's sitting there, and I think to myself, well, I could maybe take it out and use it as, an iPod or, it takes decent enough video. I could use it for that sort of thing. But I mean, at the same time, it doesn't belong to me, and I don't want to take it out and maybe break it, and then have them be like, oh, by the way, 3 years ago we sent you this, we want it back. Because so I'm just, it's in a box, and it's in the box I sent it. I haven't opened it since it got sent back to me, and whatever. But so anyway, there's they've got a new phone coming out, and their description on their website. First, their website used to be CommodoreSmart.com, and it's not anymore. Commodore Smart doesn't exist. The new website is now Commodore-CBM.com. I don't know why, whatever. But they've got a new phone called the Leo. The actual website, there really isn't much information there yet, but the description on their website is a stable device with a unique style, which is not altogether, it's not very, it doesn't sell it too much. It's like, it's stable and looks okay.
It works.
Yeah, and then underneath, Commodore has understood its customers' requests, and you mean for better tech support, and decided to propose the new Commodore Leo, a faster, solid, stable smartphone with a fine chassis and an elegant style, but at an affordable price. Commodore Leo will be your faithful companion at work, traveling, at home, and in leisure time. Now, I don't know.
It's the kind of phone you would like to put under your pillow.
Yeah, all that stuff, it's solid, stable, fine chassis. None of that is really, this is the best phone ever. It's solid. It doesn't crash. It's made of material. I've got to review one guy. There's a Wired Italy. And when the Pet came out, initial reviews all seemed to be on Wired and Gawker and all these other sites were all by this Maurizio Pesci guy. And here again we have an exclusive first look at the Leo by Maurizio Pesci. And the article's in Italian. I've got it translated here. I'm not going to read it because it's long, but
tell us the major issues.
It's got front and rear. It's got rear panel Gorilla Glass. The screen is smaller. 3 gigahertz with 2 gigs of memory. 16 megapixel main camera. Front is 8. Operating system is Android 5.1. That's Lollipop. That's the same as the Pet. I think they're up to almost releasing version 7 now. And
it's actually out now.
Is it?
I think it's called Nougat or something.
Yeah, Nougat. Yeah. So it's not a huge upgrade over the Pet. I'm guessing it's the same exact. It says here the operating system is Android 5.1 with minimum interface customization, including wallpapers, themes, and 2 emulators, which are also available for free on the Play Store. So, no preloaded games. You have the same issue with trying to get them on as you did with the other one. It's essentially it's the same one with a little bit of a different. Slightly bumped specs, but nothing. It's not like the fantastic next generation of phone. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. It's not out yet. You can't get it yet. If you go to the website, it's just. I guess you can request an email when something happens.
Nice.
But there's no. There's nothing in the store, there is no store at the moment, I don't think.
But the Pet phone is stable, was stable. It didn't crash on you while you did your review.
Yeah, for the most part, it was stable enough. I couldn't get Chrome to work.
Which is weird since it's Google Chrome.
Yeah, yeah.
Google Android, Google Android OS.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was stable enough. I didn't, I played some games and whatnot, didn't have any problems with it, but I mean, it's a decent enough phone. It's just, and I think my major complaint with it was just the fact that it was way overpriced for what it was. I wouldn't have minded putting down, $100, $200 on that. Because it was it was a year old. It had been released already in China. It was
as a WoW phone.
Yeah, it had been around the block for a bit, and so it wasn't brand new stuff. You could get a lot better of a phone for for the same price as this. So all you're really paying for is having the logo, silk screened onto the battery and the back of the case and all the little removable parts on it. So I mean, the novelty is fun. It's cool to start it up and see the logo, but I mean, and I don't even know what the situation. I guess they're going ahead with a new phone. Last I heard, they were still in legal trouble over using the name Commodore, and they were betting on the fact that Commodore never did a smartphone. Therefore, they can do whatever they want with the name because they're not encroaching on what Commodore used to do. And I don't know how much of a leg there is to stand on that, as far as legally. But I mean, I guess they're doubling down on it because they're trying to make something new.
Right. So next thing is in the last Retropla show, Senat was very much positively talking about his experience on playing the Wheel of Fortune with us. Thank you, Senat. And we heard your wishes for more shows. And so on the 28th of August, we will have another show. And that's a Sunday. That's the last Sunday in August, the Sunday after Gamescom. We will play with Vanessa Ortega on Twitch.
Yes, a professional who's going to beat our asses, probably.
Probably, yeah, because I suck at playing video games. I even lost against AJ in Pit Stop 2.
What do you mean even lost?
Which still hurts me.
That's just because I'm an expert. I'm a champion here.
And this show will be broadcasted at twitch.tv/ZineWorld at 9 p.m. in the Central European Summertime, which is 3 p.m. on your side in your time zone in the US. Which time zone is that, Aishay?
I am Eastern Standard Time.
At Eastern Standard Time.
And that would be noon Pacific Time.
Right. Which is the time zone Vanessa lives in.
Yes.
So, our next guest, Vanessa Ortega on twitch.tv/ZineWorld or in the Twitch section on our homepage, zineworld.org. And feel free to join, come in, and participate.
Yep.
And look at us, how we look when we lose against professional e-gamers.
Yeah.
Because we never did that before. Yeah. It's another first.
Yes. I got one here. We harp on the Extra Life thing continuously, and we're doing it again this year. But now we're also we have a Scene World team for Able Gamers.
Able Gamers, yeah.
Yes. So go over to that. We'll put the link in the description because I can't think of what it is off the top of my head here. And yeah, donate. We're going to be doing something similar probably to that, to Extra Life 24 Hours of Gaming. It's a little different. Able Gamers,
they actually are a thing that collects money and support for handicapped children who cannot play video games with normal input controllers like gamepads and so on. So they put an effort into making possible for such kids that they can play video games like you and me and having a normal childhood. Yes. So that means, for example, like modified game controllers and so on. For example, NVIDIA is known to support that direction, you know, with their latest Steam controller. Some community member made it possible to reprogram the controller so somebody could play the games with one hand. And NVIDIA said, wow, that's cool, we will support that. So that's one of those things, you know.
So they do things a little bit differently. There's different ways that you can raise money for it. We'll probably do something along the same lines as the Extra Life, which means that we'll be doing 2 24-hour gaming things this year.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not yet specifically clear if they have a similar event. We will see what we do that. I mean, we could also make a show not going 24 hours or making more than one show and so on.
Yeah, no, there's lots of different ways.
Exactly. So the donor drive page is their donation page, and their main page is ablegamers.com.
Right. So we'll put links to our donation pages in there so everyone can donate. We'll give out more information as we know more and as we figure out what's going on. So.
Right.
So what else is up? You had a meeting at a Slow Donkey.
Yes, at the Slow Donkey restaurant with former Commodorians from Germany and Switzerland. And I mentioned that in the last podcast that we had that I would write a report on it. And it can now be read on our blog at sceneworld.org/blog.
Woohoo.
Right. And also, I was participant in the digital games conference called Power Up Digital Games Conference.
Yep.
And I held a speech on the topic of Scene World and how my experience is with the video game industry. And also mentioned you, of course, in the podcast and all our development. And this is also now on YouTube because Zettabyte Marketing, who held the conference, was kind enough to give us permission to upload it to our YouTube. So you can see that and listen to that at youtube.sceneworld.org. So that is out too. And and this conference will be repeated after a while. Yeah. So, and it was a conference that was virtual over a conference platform called Discord, and that's actually pretty nifty. So,
Discord, isn't that for? That's a similar to like TeamSpeak or something to that effect, where you can communicate with people whilst gaming and other stuff. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And they used it for the conference.
Okay. Yeah, I was one of the early I got a copy of that real early before it was even like public, and I never used it.
Well, now I did. It was pretty nifty. Didn't have much problem with it.
Cool.
So the longer we are doing this, the more interested people get in that. So it's gaining interest here. So it's the first time that I was invited in a video game conference as a speaker. So thanks for that by our friends from the video game industry. It was a great pleasure and honor to talk. And the partition there was quite some participation and good question asked, so feel free to check it out.
Yeah. We got some new stuff up on YouTube too. In the last couple of weeks, we've got aside from your speech, or from your presentation there, we also have Andrew, our editor, did a unboxing and demonstration of Shotgun.
Exactly. A multiplayer game for the multiplayer adapter.
And Kevin Castiles, another one of our fine editors and one of the more prolific of the reviewers, reviewed the Vic MIDI cartridge for the VIC-20. So that's pretty nifty as well.
Yes. And John did a speech on the topic of collecting Commodore stuff.
Yes, he did. We hope to see more from him in the future because he was pretty awesome as well.
So yes, a lot of awesome reviewers, a lot of awesome reviews, and we got some pretty good feedback on the video. So thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, got anything else?
I can't think of anything else.
All right, well, let's get to Nick. Nick is hanging out over there waiting for us. And, let's go talk to him.
Oh, so welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you for having me. It is great to be here at the Scene World podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting because you are a supporter since the second issue, actually, and it's the first time that we actually talk on Skype.
Yeah. So not the first time we talked, but yeah, first time on Skype.
True. Yes, because I found your phone number and I called you.
Right.
He does that.
I was like, who is calling me from Germany? It can't be a bill collector.
Yes. So we should introduce Nick. He is that guy that originally started out as a reader first. And then later on, he joined this team when I asked him to join. And the first thing he did for us actually was NTSC fixing the voodoo noter. Interestingly.
Which I don't know how I did that because I wasn't very good at that point. At
yeah. You know,
I just messed around with the code until it worked, and then it started working. And I said, I think I knew DO12, and I said, well, I think if I mess with the LDA value before D012, and I change it to something that might make the machine do what it's supposed to do, then we'll have a fix. And I think that's all I did, but I can't remember.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It worked.
Because back in that day, not everybody of us had internet, and people were still sending discs in. And the interesting thing is, when we organized the magazine, we totally forgot that Voodoo Noter would crash on American machines.
Okay.
So I was like, oh my God, we have a problem here, you know? So, yeah. So let me ask you actually, how did you start with the Commodore 64?
When I was a kid, my dad's a ham radio operator and also just into electronics, and he was always into kind of what was coming out and what was new. And for his kids, he always wanted to help them, see the future. He wanted to give them a leg up. So when I was a little kid, I think we had a Texas Instruments TI-99, which had, we had like the Star Trek game for it and Hunt the Wumpus. I remember that one. And for himself, since he was into the ham radio, he was getting into doing sorry, my mind's blanking, of course. He was getting into doing Morse code with the computer, and he got a VIC-20, and it had the RS-232 interface, and he had an old teletype machine from the 60s that he hooked up, and he actually got the VIC-20 to read the Morse code and print it out on the teletype, and that was a really big deal. So that was my first introduction to the Commodore, and I think we may have had a game or two for that computer. I also remember we had the Timex Sinclair computer, which was kind of neat, and we'd play Hangman and stuff on that with a little tape drive. And then one day there was a kid down the street from me at a Commodore 64, this kid Sonny, and his mom was like really into supporting his computer. You know, he had a lot of games. He had all these discs with a disk drive, and it was a cool thing. And I was like, Dad, I need to get one of these. This is the greatest thing. And he's like, well, I already bought you 2 other computers. I already had the VIC-20. And those, I don't want to invest money into another computer that's only going to last us 6 months, you know, because at that time they were costing hundreds of dollars. I said, no, this one's going to last a long time. So he went over there with me to their house, and we saw this, you know, he saw the computer, and he was like, okay, this has some potential to last for a while, as opposed to the other computers that were out of style and, you know, couldn't really do much past playing Hangman. And then, so he got me the Commodore 64, and then we'd go to, then we'd have a monthly group, actually a weekly group at a rec center that had a Commodore 64 group every Monday night. And people would bring the SX64s. They would just bring their entire systems, you know. It would end up being these huge copy parties. There was also like some guys doing GEOS coding in the corner, or like a little like impromptu, you know, thing where a guy would do an educational lesson on some aspect of coding or programming. Mostly it was guys who were into business stuff, though. A lot of the game kids would just sit in the corner and copy discs, you know. It's like, oh, you got Skate or Die. Awesome. Oh, wow, yours actually copies with just a nibbler, you know. Like, this is great. You know, I just got the ESI version. It'll copy perfectly. It's a big deal. So that was kind of what that's kind of what I got into. Then my dad had a store where he had his electronics repair business, and on the other half of it was kind of empty, and he didn't know what to do with it. And am I going on too long, by the way?
No.
This is like my entire Commodore history. My dad then had this other half of his store that he wasn't doing anything with. He thought he was going to like rent it out, offices to small businesses, and that never really took off. Meanwhile, he had hired this guy Jimmy, who was a BBS operator, one of the BBSs I called, who was repairing stuff with him. And Jimmy one day said, hey, this computer store down the block's going out of business, and they got a lot of stuff, and he wants to sell it cheap. And my dad said, you know, I could turn the other half of my store into a computer store, and let's see if it works. And one day he just bought their entire inventory, and the next week we opened the other half of my dad's shop as a Commodore 64 game rental business. And every day after school, I would come down and we'd rent games. We'd buy the new games that came out. We'd go to people's houses and buy lots of, you know, games that they had. You know, guy had like 50, 60 disc originals with the boxes and the manuals and everything. We'd buy them. We'd rent the games out every week. And also, at the same time, my dad was fixing old Commodore machines. So PLA chips would go bad. You know, we'd start fixing them. We'd fix the monitors. And that kind of became a thing. We did that for a couple of years, and it was actually really fruitful, you know, really at the right place at the right time, late 80s. And every day after elementary and middle school, I would run over there and hang out till he closed. And that's kind of what I did with my childhood.
But he didn't know that you would hang on it still today.
Yeah, it's one of the few things, you know, I got into that, and I got into making music at the same time. And those are the two things I still like to do. So, yeah, I've stayed in a state of arrested development ever since.
Okay. So, and how did you start your scene career then?
I used to get games. You know, first I got into BBSing. First we had Quantum Link, and then my dad got the bill. My dad got the bill for that after 1 month. And he said, "You're not doing this anymore."
Yeah, I had the same experience.
So then another kid showed me at the Monday night SWAT meetings, oh, there's this thing called BBSs, and they're free, and people just run them. And here's the thing called Magic Term, and you can use this to call boards. And that would just opened up a whole world. I wanted to be a BBS operator, and I wanted, you know, oh, man, where's boards and all this stuff. And Jimmy, who worked at my dad's shop, was really connected with some of the local group guys, like the Inner Circle guys. And they would get all the latest releases from Europe. and he'd have like 50 discs in a disc box for me at my dad's shop the next day that were, we didn't rent these out. We kept these behind the counter just for us. And I would just copy discs from Jimmy every day. And I would have groups like Abyss and FBR on the intros and Eaglesoft and, Triad, Fairlight, all these groups. And I was just, these guys to me, like, were just awesome. I would just like look at these guys in awe and be like, I want to do that. I don't want to program games. I don't necessarily want to create the games. I'm not necessarily interested in that. I want to learn how to crack games. I want to learn how to break copy protection. And I want to create a cool intro with my logo flashing all over the place with all these cool colors and this cool music. And that's what I liked. That's what I thought. I liked always, no matter what I've done, music or computers, I've liked underground, illegal stuff. I don't know why. I've always liked things that were just raw, dirty, underground, and very borderline, if not outright illegal. I've just always been drawn to that, the dark side of things. So for me, getting into the scene was just admiration for what those guys did. And then in the late 90s, I kind of got out of it into the 90s. I got an IBM. My Commodore got put in the closet. And I think while in Europe it was having this huge renaissance, or not even renaissance, but it was still growing in the demo scene. Everybody had moved on to the Nintendo here, and then the Sega. And it was just like, I think when Super Mario Brothers didn't get an official port on the Commodore, it kind of signaled the end, because Super Mario Brothers was the game that everybody was playing on the Nintendo. And I think had it come out on the Commodore 64, it would have kept the life going. But it was considered not cool because they didn't have Super Mario Brothers. And even the bootleg port of Gianna's Sisters, that was Super Mario Brothers, wasn't the same. Yeah, and it just didn't work. And people, I think that killed it in America. I know there was a lot of business stuff on inside Commodore that was going wrong.
Well, Gianna
from my perspective as a 16-year-old kid or whatever, or 14-year-old kid or whatever I was at the time, that was the end. And so I put that away and I got an IBM, and I forgot about the Commodore until the late 90s. And then when I got back into it, I noticed all these inside demo making and coding programs started coming out. So I could get the Fairlight, intro maker, and I could get the FBR intro maker. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, these are the tools these guys were using. And I didn't know how to use any of them, but the fact that I actually had access to them kind of made me want to go back and finish old business. Right. So I kind of started studying from there and learning little bits from there. But in America, we really didn't have a scene, especially in my hometown. Nobody was a coder. Nobody was into creating graphics. We just copied games at swap parties. Nobody knew how to build an intro. Nobody knew how to crack a game. I didn't understand any of that stuff other than I had the program protection manual that I forget was the Phantom, I think, put out, the CSM program protection manual, and I cracked an SSI game. I remember I took a disk read protection error off of that once, and I thought that was a big deal. But it wasn't cool like what the European guys seemed to be doing. Over here, it was just like we had swap parties, but there was nothing cool going on. I liked what the European guys were doing. I wanted to be like them.
Yeah, and actually that's interesting because when Driven died the first time, and I was coming up with this idea of doing Scene World, of doing a disc mech, and exactly that is what I heard from the European people. Like, there's nobody in America. So this will be plain boring and this will be unsuccessful. And then I met Dustin Chambers, Fuzz, and he was like, oh, well, I know those guys like HA and, and Macbeth, Mm-hmm. and I don't know exactly how, but I think you Nick, I think you either wrote me an email or you left a comment in our guest book. Somehow you found us.
Or did I? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember much.
Yeah, well, I don't remember any details because now I'm old and I'm forgettable. But I wonder, what were your thoughts when you saw that there is a Discman coming out trying to unite the both worlds?
I don't remember. I really don't. At that time, I think I wanted to be part of the whole thing. So I was probably just reaching out to anybody who would accept somebody who didn't have that much experience. It seemed, and it still to this day seems pretty insular, as far as if we don't already know you and you're not already accepted by us, you're kind of still an outsider. And I think I always wanted to be an insider with the scene, but I feel like still to this day I'm a bit of an outsider, and that's fine with me. I'm not going to have the history that a lot of those groups have together. I'm not going to have the sense of community that a lot of those groups have together, because I wasn't with them back then. And I think that's kind of what all of their friendships are based on now. Even when I release a new piece of music on CSDB or something, I get the amount of downloads that everybody else seems to get. And I think there's people who really enjoy what I'm putting out there. But I feel like I'm not getting the same amount of comments because I'm not one of their buddies.
Right.
I'm not one of the friends of the groups. And that's totally fine. I totally get that for what it is. There's a certain support system that's been in place for a long time that I wasn't part of, and I'm still not quite part of, and that's okay with me. I could work harder to be part of it, and I just haven't for whatever reason. But so I think maybe when I see anybody, especially back then, not so much now, but back then, probably when I saw you guys reaching out, asking for people to be part of what you were doing, I was probably more excited about it just because I was an outsider, and that seemed to be okay with you. So that's probably why I was excited about it in the first place.
Ah, interesting.
Sometimes it's good to be a bit of an outsider because you have to. A lot of times when you're part of like the inner cliques, you can put out crap and everyone's still like awesome, because you know, again, like you said, it's a support structure that's been built up over the years. So when you're an outsider, you actually have to work a little bit harder to make sure that what you're doing is actually good.
Right. And for me, it's also been about just being. I could be proud of doing something I've never done before, but a lot of those guys may have done it 20 years ago, And so, for me, a huge accomplishment. I remember I did some Discmag code, maybe like a year and a half ago. That, oddly enough, looks a lot like the old Sex and Crime magazine, which I'd never seen before. So I happened to be ripping off a design I didn't even know existed. But for me, it was a huge accomplishment, and it was my own idea. But then somebody was like, "Oh, your code is crap," I was like, "Okay, well, that's fine." To me, it's a huge deal because I actually did it, and I didn't even think I was capable of it. So, it's fine though. Coding's never really been my main thing anyway. I just wanted to see if I could do it. But I'm much more into making music these days. I've always been kind of more into making music, but making music on the SID is something it's been more my focus. So it's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you say about the inner circle and so on, I think this is exactly how we started too, because I remember people like saying, "Oh, this is crap," "Oh, this is crap," like for many, many issues. And then in 2005, we finally stopped and saying, "Okay, we have enough." And then when Andrew surprised me, like when I was visiting in 2010, he was like, "Hey, I got all the stuff together. We can release our final issue of Scene World."
Yeah, well, that was kind of the reaction when I had to Scene World, and I've said it before. I was when Scene World started, I was kind of part of that inner circle thing because I had worked with Driven and Vandalism and Domination and all these other magazines and the Crest. And then Joerg comes at me and says, "Hey, we're doing this magazine. It's going to be NTSC and PAL, and we want to fill the void left by Driven." And I said, "Okay." And when I mentioned it to other people, there was such a backlash. Everyone was like, "Don't even get involved with this because it's going to be crap." And so I sat out the first issue because I was like, I don't want to be associated with it yet unless I see what it is.
Right.
So
afraid for your own reputation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there's like, how many of us are there in the, like, as far as diehard Commodore guys, maybe like a couple hundred,
right?
Yeah,
but
it's very important.
Yeah.
It's
really
interesting
weird.
because ever since we returned, people were keeping asking, "So when is the next issue coming out? Will there be more?" And since then, everybody is like happy,
Right.
Everybody is happy.
It takes time for people to consider you legitimate, I think in anything you do, and longevity has its own kind of set of cachet that comes with it. You get respect just by sticking around long enough.
Or by die and getting reborn.
Well,
Right.
I also think it's we in the beginning, at least with me when I tried doing this, I tried to make it like I wanted my contribution to be up to standard, I guess. And as time went on, I stopped caring what other people thought. So now I might, I'll do a feedback chapter, and it's nonsense. Like
Right.
everything I answer to people doesn't answer their question. It doesn't, it's just garbage. But
Right.
but it
People
works
love it.
because it works because I don't care what people think anymore.
And
I
we
think,
keep
I
getting
think the
feedback.
less you care what people think, the better off your art is, whatever
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. So, so I guess we've never been in a better state with the magazine and all the other activities. Everybody is telling us, "Oh, this is awesome! When is the next issue coming out?"
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah. So it's actually interesting to see the totally opposite. One outsider, one insider. Yeah. Well, you're still around. Right.
So do you use that because you do music in general, like outside of the 64, but you do music with the 64 and
Yeah, it's the way I kind of stay connected to it lately. Is it's always here, and it's like I need to, and plus the sound of the SID chip was a huge part of my upbringing. I'd listened to a lot of rock and roll records and synth records growing up, but then there was also the music that I'd see on Commodore 64 games, or some mornings I just load up the Tubular Bells demo and just listen to that music all morning. That would before I go to school. That's what I would do. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of inspiring sounds and songs that came out of the SID for me. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on lately with it. I kind of got all my demoing stuff out of my system. Everything, I accomplished all the stuff that I kind of wanted to do, and NTSC fixed all the games I wanted to fix for the most part. Kind of got that all out of my system. So yeah, that's kind of what my focus is on with the computer these days. I want to make sure it stays in my life till the end of eternity. But that's kind of how I use it mostly lately.
Okay, so you incorporate that into the other stuff that you're doing, like the music.
Yeah, yeah. I've been like in the last record, I put there's 3 or 4 songs on the album that have Commodore 64 SID stuff in them. They're part of the main melody, or at least filler of sound effects.
I didn't listen to the tape yet. I have to do that this
Did you
weekend.
get the tape though?
Yeah, should. I have to listen to the tape. Is there other tunes on it that have the C64 style in
Well,
it?
in the song Doxed is the main melody is a 64 doubled with other keyboards. So the main sequence line on the song Doxed is a SID. There's a sound effect coming in at the very top of Everybody's Lost that's got a SID on it. See, now I'm blanking. I know there's Sid on like one or two other songs. I can't think at the moment. But then, there's just other 64 songs I just released by themselves. There's one called El Nino I did. There's a cover I'm working on right now that I'm trying to make the Commodore the basis of.
Nice.
That I'm trying to get the bass and, keyboard sounds right for. And then I'll probably double up a drum machine on top of it and some real guitars and some other keyboards to fill that one in. I'm constantly using it as a source of inspiration.
So when the new Maxis is finally out and we have NTSC fixed music routine, then you definitely should send us one to use for the new issue.
Okay. Yeah, I need to write something that I think would be good for the magazine. That I'm still
something hectic.
I like slower, moodier, funkier pieces.
No, that was a joke, of course. No, but for a magazine, it should be.
You need something you can read to
just
kind of get into, So
I'm not something that makes you nervous when you listen to it.
That won't work.
Oh, I'm freaking out. I have to put.
Let me read this article.
Yeah, nice, great. So you did a lot of stuff on the Commodore 64, BBS, NTSC fixing, game cracking.
Yeah, but just a little bit of each of those things, and for the most part, I wasn't necessarily especially for the game cracking BBSing. There were always people who did it better than I did. But I always wanted just to do it, just to know how it worked, and to see the the wizard behind the curtain. I was always fascinated by how especially demos and crack intros, how all that kind of worked, and especially seeing decompression routines. When I was a little kid and you hit the space bar after the crack intro and you see all this like weird garbled text on the screen and the board is flashing while the game's loading in memory, I just thought it was cool because you were like almost seeing the inside of the computer, and you're seeing all that stuff happening.
Yeah, actually,
I always thought decrunch routines and depack routines were pretty badass to look at.
Actually, for the tape loaders, I read an article some weeks ago that actually the bars have a meaning, depending how thick they are, what color they have, and how fast they turn. So on tape fast loaders, they actually have a meaning.
Oh.
Well, a specific meaning on every single one, like universally, or depending on which loader?
Depending on the loader you have,
right.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
So, but especially in UK, tapes were big because tapes were cheap,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like discs over here were definitely the rage, and tapes over there were definitely the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also over here nowadays, like over there's still a big demo scene. It's probably because you guys have like extra cycles to work with that we don't have. But over here, it's always been a hardware thing, and it just seems like hardware development's much bigger in America than software development.
That's interesting. I just had this discussion with AJ a few days ago that I think since we did Scene World, we kind of helped to make every game release nowadays being officially NTSC fixed, because
right.
Suddenly being NTSC compatible is a thing,
Yeah, that's really good and really positive, and I'm glad. I wish the American scene was bigger. There's very few people doing demos in America. It would be nice to see it. I would, you have a couple get-togethers every year at like the VCF and the World of Commodore and Commodore, the one in Canada. There's a couple get-togethers every year, but again, it's not like the parties in Europe where the groups actually, get together and have their own little underground competitions, and we just don't have that mindset here. I wish there was more of that. Because I would totally go and get something together to show off and to compete with, but we just never had that here.
Yeah, we were more of the U.S. was always more kind of a user group meeting, like just kind of you'd go and you'd copy your discs and whatnot, and you'd discuss, how to do the newest Geos thing or whatever, and
Totally.
and that was it. It was, Grandpa and his whatever, this Grandma's quilt program.
And somebody would make the newsletter on Print Shop or whatever.
Yep.
And yeah. Yeah, there was a group I once belonged to called Commodore Users and Friends of the Federation. So it was like it's Commodore / Star Trek group.
And the newsletter would be in Klingon or something?
Yeah, it was called Cuff.
Okay. Funny.
Yeah, they didn't have very cool names over here either. So it wasn't like, Death Party or anything like that. It was like Sug.
Yeah. Joerg
Southtown
and
Users Group.
yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's a badass group. So glad I belong to that.
Yep.
This is really renegade.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, it didn't help establish, young hackers.
Yeah.
But what are you gonna do?
Well, we definitely should invite Robert Bernardo for an interview. He's still the big shot in user group terms.
Is there such a thing as a big shot in user group terms? I mean, user groups have kind of dwindled to the point where there's not too many left, and if there are, it's like 3 people.
Well, Robert Bernardo is still around.
Yeah, that's
He's
one
still
guy.
very active.
What's the one in the Northwest the guy? Why am I blanking on his name? The guy who created the Comet modem, and he does the PDX, the Portland Users Group. And there's also the one that is that the same one that Starbucks did the expose on, where all the Commodore guys got together and
well, that's Kevin Castillo's. That's our guy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but there's the PDX group. Yeah, I'm not really too familiar with how many groups there are. If they are though, yeah, it's like 3 guys, and it's like you guys are still renting. I don't even know if the places even know they're still renting the space.
So we should
show
get
up every Monday.
Yeah.
So we should get Robert Bernardo while he is still around. When I hear that, right. Yeah, interesting.
No, I grew up in North Jersey, and I think you're in New York, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, though, the other side of the state. But yeah, I've been here for a long time.
Well, we could actually plug your record and stuff, because if you've got one out, we could.
Nick Vivid, Watch It Fly. It's free download at nickvivid.com. nickvivid.com.
And to actually have a tape release too, because I bought it.
Yeah, I put it out on cassette. It's kind of an old school funky electronic record. So I was like, I sort of know a certain amount of guys in a boombox collecting scene, and a couple of them were like, "You should release this on cassette." So I did. So there it is. So and it actually sounds really good. I put it on an old Cobalt formula tape. Kind of gives it that real low, nice tight low end, and the kind of vintage funkiness. It sounds great on cassette. I actually think it sounds better on cassette than it does on digital. So, but the whole record was done with analog. As analog as a digital record can be, I guess.
Yeah.
Which these days is actually pretty good. They have plugins like Nebula, which I'm a big fan of, which actually sample old hardware. So I threw the album through an entire vintage Neve console that was emulated in Nebula, and I still have my old tape machine. I got the Revox A77 up there, which you guys can see. It won't be in the podcast, but I've got an old vintage, early 70s Revox A77, and I used to own a recording studio on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where I had an old Yamaha board and the tape machines hooked up and nothing but analog gear. So, I still am a big fan of all that stuff. So
You are pretty big in the New York music scene, aren't you? Because when I was Googling you, I found interviews with you and stuff.
I've done stuff. I don't feel like I've reached anywhere near the level of notoriety I strive to, but I'd like to be a lot more famous than I am right now. But I've done a lot. I came here on a mission a little over 10 years ago to make a really big dent in the New York music scene. At the time, I was doing rock and roll stuff because that's kind of what I knew, and that's what I was doing at the time. And that's my old manager, mentor, was a big rock manager in the 1970s and 1980s. And he encouraged me to move to New York, so that's what I did. And I thought I was going to be the next rock and roll sensation. And I thought putting a band together in New York was going to take a week and that it was just all going to magically happen. And it took forever. And the band I put together was we were good. We had a lot of energy and we had a lot of dysfunction, which I think is important in a rock and roll band. I think it's good when the band members hate each other.
Okay.
And that tension, I just like that tension, and I like that dysfunction, and I like I like the idea that things can fall apart at any second. And so I created a band that had that dynamic in it, and then it didn't last, and I was surprised. So I kind of created my own sense of these things that I thought were really cool, but I don't think anybody ever got a chance to really see them before they went the full distance. I'm really proud of a lot of the things I've done, but I just don't think anybody ever got a chance to see them before they burned out. So after the last band I was in, they're still together, but I left when I felt like it had reached its pinnacle and it wasn't going to go any further. And this time around, I just decided that I was going to try a whole new kind of music. I was kind of beat up on the rock thing. I injured my legs a year and a half ago after I lost my old studio. I was really stressed out about a lot of things that were going on in my life. Family member was really sick, and was dealing with that on an emotional level, and I was really stressed out. And one day I lifted something that was way too heavy for me, and I felt my legs go from underneath me. And basically what happened was I strained my entire core. I couldn't stand up without putting pressure on my chest muscles because they were actually trying to keep me standing up. So I had to stay in bed for a whole month. And I basically had time to reflect on my life and what I was doing. And I said, what I'm going to do this time around in order to have something that's going to have a sense of longevity is I'm going to stay a solo artist, and I'm not going to have any backup musicians. I'm going to do what the hip-hop guys do and play the backing tapes. I'm going to create a theatrical presentation, which means I'm going to run my own sound and lights. I'm going to devise a lighting show and a video show. And I'm going to do more electronic music and R&B style music because people can accept that. Plus, I don't think rock and roll really translates well with backing tapes. I'm going to get more into my synth and electronic roots, and I'm going to focus more in this direction so that I can do something that might actually have a chance of having some longevity this time around. Plus, it's the kind of music I'd never really written before. I was excited to do something new for the first time in like 10, 12 years. And so that's what I'm doing now is kind of redefining what my sound is. And it's nice to be a solo artist for once and do something that I actually will last as long as I want it to now, as long as I wake up every morning and still want to do it. I don't have to worry about band members quitting and things falling apart. I can just now, if I can focus on how long it goes and how determined the drive behind it is up to my, it's totally at my discretion. And so as long as I feel driven to work on it, I'm going to work on it. So I want to tour the world. I want to live in a Winnebago. My girl and I want to get a Winnebago and travel all over the country and travel all over Europe and go to Japan. And I want to play shows in clubs and art galleries and art spaces for people who'd like to see me play. And I want that to be what I do with my life. And I've always wanted that to be what I do with my life. So now hopefully I'm finally in a position to be able to do that now that I can call the shots. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's how I got here.
Very cool.
So and it's nice because now doing electronic music, I can bring. When I was doing rock and roll, I loved my Commodore 64, but I couldn't bring that musical aspect into it in any way that made sense. And now that I'm doing this more electronic thing, the Commodore's, plays a much bigger role.
Well, I mean, that is actually what a lot of people are doing since a couple of years. I mean, we had Joerg and Tess Freiser on the show, and they were exactly doing the same thing, mixing SIDS tunes and sounds with other styles of music. Welle Erdball in Germany started that a long time ago. I think they were like kind of the first who would come on stage and do the SX64 as an instrument and combine that. Yeah,
right.
And they are still doing it today but on a living, actually. It's interesting. They are touring around as a band, and from what I heard, they are not really cheap to book, so seems to work.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm hoping for. At some point, hopefully my price will go up. Capitalism at its finest, I just need to create the demand, There's certainly no shortage. The thing I've always been very lucky about, and the thing I've always really enjoyed is I've always found myself and I've always felt I was a really good songwriter. I always felt like I could sit there and kind of jam and create moody chords that go over and over in a circle and kind of create this kind of, hypnotic thing. But at the end of the day, I've always kind of been a pop songwriter. And I like songs with a verse and a chorus and a hook and a melody and lyrics that you can really kind of dig into and find some meaning in. And that's always been what I've really been into. And I feel like now it's like, for me, it's the best of all worlds. There's this kind of jammy aspect, but there's also songs. I've always felt I was really good at that, and hopefully more people will find that out as time goes on. But it's a lot of fun so far.
So the retro hype that is happening since the last 6-7 years is really helping you in that aspect.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not really paying too much attention to it yet. I wanted just to kind of get my idea of what my way of doing this kind of music sounded like out of the box for the first record, and now I'm starting to go and see what people have been doing for the last 6-7 years. I didn't really want to pay too much attention to it. I wanted to kind of just do my interpretation of what my version of electronic music would sound like, so I wouldn't be too influenced into
mainstream.
I didn't want to feel like I was trying to do what I thought I should do. I wanted to kind of go for my impulses naturally first, just to make sure I could do music that was true to myself and sound like this. So, but now I can listen to things that are a little more recent and pay attention to them and say, what am I doing that's kind of, I want to be contemporary. I don't want to sound like throwback 80s pop completely, even though that's a big part of my sound. I don't want to sound like 70s throwback music either. Even though I'm a big Kraftwerk fan, I don't want to sound like Kraftwerk. I stuff like Kraftwerk and Neu, all those bands. I love that music, and I want to bring that into what I'm doing, but I also want to be contemporary. So yeah, it's art and commerce struggle and art and trendy struggle, but that's stuff that just stays internal. Eventually, I'll work it all out, and the next record will be solid, I'm sure. I'm not concerned about my integrity at this point. I kind of know when I'm being true to myself and when I'm not. But I feel like being true to myself is a much wider canvas than I give myself credit for. So but yeah, now I'm starting to allow myself to be influenced by newer things.
As Jeroen said when we interviewed him and Tess Fries, he said copying is the best way of flattering.
Yeah. My old manager, he gave me a lot of really good advice, and his one of his things that I remember to this day is he said, "Good artists are good artists. The best artists know exactly what to steal."
Yeah.
and so yeah, of course, Plagiarism is, and for being a guy who likes, underground illegal stuff, theft is not a problem. I have no qualms about outright thieving things. So
Nice.
But yeah, I'm excited about what the future holds, and also it's funny that there's this neat little chiptune scene happening in New York. Not so much with the Commodore, but a lot of people are using the Game Boys to make records. There's a couple cool hacker spaces. I belong to the local 2600 group that meets once a month. And I'll hang out with those guys, and there's a lot of people into the chiptune scene. I think I'm the only person who uses a Commodore 64 at the group, but we have the Hackers on Planet Earth convention coming up, which is a lot like what's the one that happens in Europe every year? The big hacker meetup. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but there's DEF CON in Las Vegas. There's Hope in New York. And last time at Hope 2 years ago, I had brought my Commodore 64 with me, and I was playing 2600 hertz tones and red box tones with a tone dialer software. That was a lot of fun. But there's a bit of a chiptune scene out here. I'm not completely into it, but at some of the hacker spaces they do chiptune concerts, and I'll go and hang out. And it's kind of neat. It's an interesting scene for sure.
It's odd that you'd be the only one with the 64 because it would seem like the SID is the chiptune platform that is the most celebrated out of all of them.
It is, and there's people who own SID stations and stuff, but you got to remember the Game Boy's more portable.
Yeah, and
I think that's why you could just carry around all your songs on this thing.
Come on.
As opposed to the SX64.
Oh, come on. I would totally carry around my SX64.
Yeah. Totally. In New York, nobody, I'm not taking that thing on the train. I'm not walking, I'm not walking a mile to the train with my SX64 just to go to a chiptunes concert. Plus I got to, yeah, it's not worth it. I think that's probably the reason most people are picking the Game Boy. Portability, especially in this city.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Newer trains here in Germany, they have a power outlet in modern trains, and you can book a table if you need one. Yeah. But most tables are pretty small for tiny notebooks.
Yeah.
And then I get my SX64.
We don't have that. We don't have that over here. As you know, I took Joerg on the path, and there's nowhere to do anything there.
No, not at all. So yeah, if you're hopping on the train system in New York or Jersey, plus you're at your destination within a half hour anyway.
You might be able to set up on your neighbor's lap.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the train that we used to get actually to New York was pretty funny because it was going up and down. This is not the most modern train system.
It's really a shame because Amtrak, our nationwide train system, they actually rent that from the freight lines. The freight lines own all the tracks. And so Amtrak has to kind of use whatever they allow them to have. And our mass transit could be so much better.
Oh, yeah.
It would be amazing to have, what they have in Europe is just so far, in a way, leaps and bounds ahead of us in terms of mass transit in the trains system. I'd love to see a great train system in America and a better train system in New York. We had a bad hurricane a couple years ago that flooded a couple of our larger train systems, and we have one called the L train, which I think is 250,000 riders every day. And they actually have to shut that down because of the water damage. In 2 years, they're planning on a total shutdown of that train system for over a year, which is going to cause 250,000 people every day with no way to get to work. So it's going to be really crazy here in the next couple of years where people aren't really sure how they're going to get around and what they're going to do about it. Somebody created the idea of putting that particular train goes under the East River between Brooklyn and Manhattan. And people were thinking, well, while it's shut down, they could create this floating floating what was it, like a floating tunnel that would float on the East River. Some kids from MIT came up with this idea to create a floating tunnel that would be like air, it'd be like a huge air mattress.
Right. Well, so I guess we've spoken about everything, even about the train system.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you are a really very interesting person. I didn't know you had so much things you did, I only knew that one part. That one part you did for SceneWorld.
Yeah. Yeah, my Commodore history is long and, but yeah, it's still fun, It's just, it's part of my childhood and never want to let it go. Yeah. I just refuse to.
Yeah.
So.
Now, did you do stuff did you do demo stuff?
Not really. Only in BASIC. I would write programs in BASIC. I wrote a couple terminal programs because I was also, again, being big into the BBS thing. But I was mostly like rewriting code from other terminal programs and stealing their ML. Okay. So I was never really, even the one I did a couple years ago, Strike Term, was just a hack a Nova term. And that it was just basically because I wanted something that looked like, you're dialing IP addresses instead of phone numbers. So it made a little more sense to somebody who was new to all this.
Right.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I really didn't do any coding at all. And then only until Laxity had their last demo or intro competition a year and a half ago did I finally was like, okay, I'm going to actually learn Turbo Assembler and actually write some code. So I did, when I was part of that user group, I had a little cracking group called UDI, Underground Domain Incorporated, because I wanted my own three-letter group, like FBR and like all the other ones that I thought were cool. I'm like, I'm going to have UDI. And so I just had all my friends who were like, okay, come up with a name. You're going to be Breaker. Okay, I'm going to be Mojo. I'm going to be Phoenix, I'm like, so I had like this group of my friends who all had Commodore 64s, and this is our group. But we didn't do anything. Nobody knew how to do anything. We just all copied games. But so I had one other kid who actually knew how to program in BASIC, and he could create sprites. And so we created this intro in BASIC with a basic sprite thing that actually moved like one thing at a time around the screen with the UDI logo, and created a scroller in BASIC that would move one letter at a time and had these like flashing UDI things. But it was all in BASIC and it looked horrible, I guess, by modern standards. Wow. But at the time I was like, yeah, we have an intro, but it was all written in BASIC. So. Yeah, that was as cool as it ever got for me back then. And then I think the memory issues were so bad that it couldn't even load the next program you were intending to have it attached to. So, yeah. But I ended up, what I did was for the intro competition, I actually still had that basic intro from back then. I actually grabbed the sprites that guy used, and I used them in my last intro. So that I did for the intro compo. So that was kind of neat that I was able to use something from back then as part of what I, did recently. But that was just once I did that, I kind of got that out of my system. I didn't need to do it again. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel almost like NTSC is having almost a little bit of a resurgence lately.
It would be nice. I mean, I saw every once in a while I see a demo that somebody does, and it actually looks really cool. And it would be nice if more guys just even put out regular demos with effects that we've already seen before. It'd be fine. Just something that was cool or neat, or had a rasterized photo that they took off online, and be like, yeah, I just created a koala out of this, and a little scrolly text and some original music, or even some hacked music from something else, just to put something out. I think would.
I actually, when I saw Nick's tape during lunchtime, I had an idea for a fun release. I think instead of a disc Mac, we could make an issue, and that would be a tape Mac. That would be totally fun, like a tap file, and then you would
that would be interesting.
Would be like loading one text after another, coming up next. I think
I'd be down for seeing that.
Yeah. I guess that hasn't been done before, you know.
Yeah, I don't think that has been done. No.
Nobody's made a tape mag before.
They'll have to make a new category
Wow.
on the CSDB for that.
Genius, then. First time ever.
I mean that's my thing. I like to make things the first time.
Yeah, right. If you've done something that's never been done before, then at least now you could, on the Commodore 64, if you can find something that hasn't been done before, it's got validity.
Well, Scene World is at least one thing that hasn't been done before, and hey, we are still around, you know.
Yeah, it's true.
And now we even have a podcast, you know.
Yeah, a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream channel, and
And there's a lot of, and you guys have also, I used to say you guys, I feel like I'm not part of it most of the time, but really.
Well, you are. You are.
I know I am, but, it's like, when I get updates from you, it's like, hey, we're in this magazine, or we're in that magazine, or this convention is spotlighting us, or that thing's spotlighting us. It's pretty impressive, all the stuff you're doing to get the word out.
Well, John actually said he will make a booth for the EEEC. I think it was called, yeah. So we will have for the first time official. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for the first time we will have an official booth, and John will represent us. So
oh boy,
that's kind of cool. Yeah.
I still never made it out to that either. That's Chicago's like very tough to get to, even though I keep having people telling me they'll give me a ride out. I still never make it out for that, but that's another thing.
I've been putting that one off for about 8 years now.
Yeah.
Every year it's like, yeah, maybe I'll go to this one. No, I'm not going to.
I have guys upstate who are like, hey, if you can get upstate, we'll give you a ride the rest of the way to Chicago. And I'm like, Yeah.
Well,
it's cool too. You know what I really love seeing is when I see photos from that, and I see guys who have tables full of old things still in the original packaging. Oh, it's like here's a bunch of super snapshot V4s ready to just selling. I'm like, if I was there, I would totally buy like one of each of those just to like have the old school feeling of buying something new for the first time from like the old days, Yeah. So when we had the store, I remember the day that, the Final Cartridge 3 came out, and we got that. And I still have my original Final Cartridge 3,
It never breaks.
Those were really magical times. And
I still have the one from my grandfather that we bought new. Never broke. Still around.
Still around. Yeah, I know. It's amazing with these machines. What they made. They actually made stuff that lasted for the most part.
But the funniest moment is when somebody pops up something on eBay and saying rare, and then you have it like 50 times for sale.
Yeah.
And like, okay, this is how rare it is. Like 50 times on eBay, it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
The best stuff I find is on Craigslist. I'll find a lot of local cool things on Craigslist. I'll check for Commodore stuff.
But this is Germany, unfortunately. We don't have Craigslist.
Yeah.
I mean, we have it. We have Craigslist Germany, but it doesn't. Nobody actually knows it. Nobody uses it.
The best stuff I've found is in like just random garage sales, because if people put it up on Craigslist, usually they know kind of what they're putting up. The same thing with eBay. It's like they know what they're putting up, so it's going to be priced pretty high. But you find some random schlub down the street that's having a garage sale, and they've got all this stuff out there. They have it's been in their basement for 10 years. They don't know what it is, and they just want to get rid of it.
Right. Every once in a while on Craigslist, though, you get that too. I bought a lot a couple years ago. Right before Hope, I wanted to get another computer so I could have a couple on display. And there was this guy who had a lot for, I think, $150, and it was 3 Commodore 64s, 164C, a couple printers, SwiftLink, which was really nice, couple, bunch of discs, a whole bunch of stuff, a 1702, and it was like, I think like $150 for everything. So, and like I just went and picked it up that day, and it was on Craigslist for like a week, and nobody bid on it. So, yeah. So every once in a while you get lucky. I think in America that's like the good thing, is that the interest really isn't there for the computer. So, if you find stuff, it's relatively easy to get.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm living in the wrong country then. Yeah.
There was a guy. in Long Island a couple weeks ago. Apparently, he was selling his old BBS setup from the 80s because he had the Lieutenant Colonel hard drive and he had a whole bunch of other stuff. And I totally missed out on it. I could have gotten a Lieutenant Colonel for like $50. That would have been fun, even though the it's obsolete by today's standards. It would have been cool to like just throw up a BBS running on the Lieutenant Colonel, to see what it looked like.
Yeah.
But, what can you do?
Then you get people putting things on that don't actually know what they're getting. I just got this, and I thought they had it listed as a C64 mouse, and I was like, ooh, and it's not $120 like every other 1351 is.
Right.
It was like 10,
and you can actually use it for SteamWorld.
Right. It was like $10. So I was like, oh yeah, well it's a tank mouse. It's an Amiga. It doesn't work.
Oh, too bad.
So at least I didn't spend $120 on it, but it's not at all what they thought it was.
Not a 1351.
Nope. No, it's an Amiga tank mouse.
I can't even remember if I ever owned one of those mouses. I may have, right at the end, I may have had one of those.
Don't you say mice in English?
Not for
we do say mice, yeah. But I sometimes use the wrong vernacular, I guess.
Yeah, I had one of these, the actual 1351 for a while. I got it new, but I mean, it's with all of my other 64 stuff in some other dimension somewhere. I don't know where it ended up.
Right.
Huh. Right.
So I've been thinking, I've got the little eye controller thingy. You know, the little joystick that clips onto the side of the keyboard.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, I had one of those. I don't know where mine is either. And it's got the little swirly
Yep.
plug. Yeah, I had one of those.
Yeah, I got one of them. I've been using that thing for graphics and stuff, which has been great. But I've just been thinking about, like, it'd be nice just to have the mouse just to mess around with it. And whatnot,
right.
But
right.
You can't find them.
Is that how most of the graphic guys are doing their graphics these days?
What's that?
I always wondered how like some of the big graphic artists are doing their graphics because some of the stuff looks incredible, and I have no idea how.
Many people do it on a PC. I mean, there's plenty of graphic stuff for the PC, like P1, whatever.
Oh, right.
I don't.
I've seen some of the conversion programs, but I just didn't know how a couple of the graphic artists, if they were still. I'm such a purist. Like, if I can't do it in Turbo Assembler on a real machine, I'm not going to bother.
No, I do most of mine on an actual machine, and I usually just use the keyboard for pixeling it in. But if I need to make like a long line or something, that's a pain. So I got the little eye controller thing. He's sitting next to it to use. But nice. If I'm on the road, I'll do it on the emulator, and I've got a whole. I don't know where I put it. I've got a whole keyboard with the proper C64 mappings, so I can.
Oh, nice!
So I can use that on the road if I'm somewhere else.
Where'd you get that thing?
I just did their decals. You just stick on the keys.
You actually made that?
No, you can order it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're just a whole set of stickers.
The one thing I want to get right now is a MIDI controller. I'm still. There's the one you can build yourself. I just haven't done it.
Why don't you buy the Kerberos from Germany? That's pretty neat.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Wasn't the Messiah cartridge? Isn't that something that's?
Yeah, that's that too. I actually have it. Yeah, from Sweden. That's another thing. And it also has a MIDI connector.
Yeah.
And it has a graphical interface, so you can actually move it around like Cubase.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
That's a Messiah.
There's that Station 64 that just came out over like a year ago, and it's just literally, excuse me, it's literally a SID station on the Commodore, so you can like just use keyboard for playing live. It's not for
the original SID station is pretty rare, actually.
Yes, so basically it's like a recreation of the SID station, and you don't have to do, there's no tracking on it or anything. It's just the sounds. And full keyboard, 3 voice mapping, which is pretty cool. I just want to get a MIDI to play with that with my MIDI keyboard, but as it is, I still have fun playing on the Commodore 64 keyboard. It was cool. You know what was also cool is what's his name? The guy who developed the 128.
Dave Haney?
Bill Hurd.
Bill Hurd. I interviewed him too, yeah.
Yeah, he works for Hackaday now.
Yeah, he plugged us.
So he's always doing Commodore stuff on Hackaday. And I remember running into those guys when I did the Hope Convention 2 years ago. They had a table right near mine, and they were all about what I was doing with the Commodore, and I couldn't figure it out. And they're like, "Oh, Bill Hurd's on our board of directors, and we're doing Commodore 64 videos and a Hackaday all the time." And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that, like, yeah, because then, like, the guys across from me with the Vintage Computer Federation, the VCF
Festival,
guys.
maybe? Vintage Computer Festival.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do the one on the East Coast every year. They were across from me with the whole Apple exhibit. And they actually got really offended that I was there doing a Commodore exhibit because they were like, "Who's this guy doing a Commodore thing? That's our thing. That's what we do." and like I was like trying to be really nice. I'm like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you guys." You know, I helped them carry all their Apple stuff upstairs to the convention. You know, just like they were like, they just didn't want anything to do with me the entire weekend. They had this 27 different Apple computers running. At one point, one of their Apples broke, and they needed one of the RAM chips that obviously they go between both computers. And so I actually had a couple boards on me. So I gave them a RAM chip, and they didn't even say thank you. They were just like, it was almost like it was owed to them. So,
Oh, yeah.
kind of on the outs with those guys right now, and at least my perception.
Too bad.
I had no idea they were even going to be there, but and my girlfriend wanted me to print out a thing on the printer with Print Shop that said "Commodore rules, Apple drools," like old school taunting.
Yeah.
Between the Commodore and Apple clubs.
Yeah.
But we didn't do it.
Yeah, you're right. When I was interviewing Jack Peddle, he was like, "Hey, Apple bought chips from us." Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's right. You would have been nothing without us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Apple. And that sucked too, because in school, the only thing they would have in the school was the apples. Commodore was not in the schools here. I think that's been discussed before, that the marketing to the schools was so horrible on Commodore's part.
Yeah.
We had two Commodores in my school.
You did, maybe.
Yeah, we had the pets. When I was in elementary school, we had a pet. But when it came to elementary school, the apples came in, and that was, everybody was using those, and they were encouraging all the kids to use the apples. And the games weren't there, the quality wasn't there, the computer just wasn't as good. I couldn't figure out why everybody loved that thing. Yeah. Commodore was just vastly superior in all aspects.
We had the, I think they were Apple IIs, and they were on the big metal carts that they would take from classroom to classroom. There was 3 of them, and you'd have to wait to get your turn to use the Bank Street Writer or some garbage software.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I remember a kid brought in Skate or Die one day, and you were trying to do the half pipe, and the player would go around the thing. I'm like, you couldn't even get good graphics.
Yeah.
It was like Skate or Die looked, or not Skate or Die. It was like, yeah, it was Skate or Die or California Games, but it was like, like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I remember that's what I had kind of, grown up on. That's what I was used to. And then I got the 64, and I was I'd never heard of a Commodore 64. Nobody had one. Nobody knew anything about it. But I mean, it didn't take long before, I'm looking at it, and it was so much better than, these Apple IIs with their weird like orange and blue color scheme, and the, like the bleed in the monitor and stuff. It was just, it seemed so half-assed compared to what the 64 was capable of doing.
It was amazing how much, vision they had when they built this machine, because it's like, they're still finding out things you can do on it. You're still exploring different modes of creativity with it. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. Oh, that's another interesting thing I should mention too that might be good for the podcast, is when I was doing the Hope Convention 2 years ago, Edward Snowden was was the main speaker. Really? He came over from Russia and he was the main keynote. And his parents were actually at the convention.
Whoa.
And Bernie S., famous hacker from Philadelphia, who was partially involved in setting up the whole thing, brought his parents over to my table. said, Nick, I'd like you to meet Edward Snowden's parents. And they said, oh, Edward's first computer was a Commodore 64. And so we can thank the Commodore 64 for sending Edward Snowden on his eventual rise in the hacker community to be the whistleblower genius that he was. So they said his first video game was Mule, and that I think Mule was the first game. And they mentioned one other game I can't remember, but I know they mentioned he used to play Mule a lot when he was a little kid.
Nice.
So, yeah. So that was his first computer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for sitting with us.
All right, gentlemen.
All right.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure too.
And let me know what's up, and we'll stay in touch, AJ.
All right.
Cool.
Sounds
Yeah. So talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
Bye. Bye-bye.
And that was Nick Vivid. You can check him out and grab his album, Watch It Fly, at nickvivid.com. You can actually even get it on cassette. As for us, you know where to find us, sceneworld.org. We're on iTunes. We're on any number of podcast aggregation sites. My site is justwestofhell.com. Joerg is over at nafcom.eu. And we will see you next time.
Cowabunga.